Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So I
And
just
then
want to.
I put a screen in a multiple people. So we
Okay,
see
here we
everybody's faces.
go. Just one more minute, and we'll have everything set to go.
Small step for the man, big step for the mankind.
Okay, here we go. Okay, so Erev Tov, or good day, good evening to everybody.
Hello.
I'd like to first thank Lev for honoring me to give you a few minutes on the RambaN. As we'll see, the RambaN is a bit hard to categorize. For example, Rashi is much easier. Rashi, we can say he is the one he is the middleman between the Torah and Am Yisrael. He's the one who gave Am Yisrael access to the Torah Shebichtav and the Torah Shebal Peh. The Rambam, for example, he is the one who codified the Torah, who brought rationalization into the Torah. The RambaN is a much harder character to figure out who he was. We could say that he was a jack of all trades. That we'll see later on in the presentation, that he really delved into everything. Okay, I'm going to give here a few minutes on the RambaN. There is an enlightening Wikipedia article on the RambaN as well. So what I don't cover, you can see there. I'm going to give maybe a little bit more background on the RambaN, and the nitty-gritty you could probably read over there. Okay, we have no real picture of who the RambaN was. In fact, we don't have too much firsthand information on the RambaN. He had no biographer. This is a picture that is in a Beit Knesset in Akko, Israel, but we're not sure how real it really is. Before we get into the RambaN, I'd like to give here a little background of where we stand in history at the time to put things in perspective. Okay, so we can see over here Europe in about 1215. We saw in the previous slide that the RambaN was born, according to most sources, about 1194. Even that's not accurate, not necessarily. We don't have a first-hand testimony to that. So most of his life was his grown-up life was in the 13th century. Here we have a map of Europe at around 1215 CE. You can see over here, right in the center is the Holy Roman Empire, right, which was actually ruled by the Pope in a certain sense. Of course, there was the secular politics, but that's a different story. And we have on the bottom the Iberian. We have France in the middle.
That's Germany today, so people don't get confused. It's Germany. The Holy Roman Empire is Germany today.
Okay, and we have France in the middle, and we have the Iberian Peninsula, right, which is where Spain is. Aragon, Castile, Leon, all those little kingdoms that today constitute Spain. What I've listed over here are some of the historical things that happened, right, to the Jews in that time period, right, where we have, on the one hand, in the Holy Roman Empire, we have Pope Innocent, right, Yimach Shmo v'Zichro, right, who invented the yellow star, right, the Jewish yellow star, and right, and was a great oppressor of the Jewish people. Of course, we are here in the middle of the Crusades. In France, right, where in large parts of France, the Crusades, right, spilled over. We have over here on the left side several disasters that happened to the Jewish people, right? Great rabbis who had to flee. In 1240, the Talmud was burned. On the right side, we have, right, on the right side, we have, on the other hand, right, the Crusades in the Middle East, where in the late 12th century, Saladin recaptured it from the Crusaders and was actually rather lenient towards the Jews. The Rambam was Saladin's, right, doctor. And when we go back to the Iberian Peninsula to the left side, there we have a special period called the Reconquistado. That's when the Christians, when the Spanish are recapturing the the Iberian Peninsula from the Muslims. That was actually a period of a relatively good period for the Jews, right? We have a King James, who was the king of Aragon, who ruled for about 50, 60 years. He was very good to the Jews. And in that context, right, the RambaN flourished, even though towards the end, we'll see there was more and more influence by the Christians, even there in Spain. Okay, so here we have a quick map here of the reconquest of Spain. I don't want to get into all the details. What I do want to show you, though, of course, is where the RambaN was born and lived, which is the town of Girona. Girona, we see it over here with the red marking. It's in what's called Castilla, very close to the French border. Now, that has as we'll see, that has a marked influence. The fact that the RambaN was close to the French border, he had influence also from the French Jewish Talmudic scholars. Here we see over here a quick a quick chart here of the RambaN's family. That right, the RambaN, his wife's name is unknown. They had several boys and girls. It's not really sure how many girls they exactly had. What is for sure is that his oldest son was called Nachman. His youngest son was called Shlomo. Right, one of the girls was married to Gershon, who was the father of Rabbi Levi ben Gershon, the Ralbag. And we see also that the RambaN's father Nachman had several brothers. One of them, Avraham, was the father of Rabbeinu Yonah, who was also a very, very well-known figure at the time. Okay, here we see a list of the contemporaries of the RambaN, right? Each one of their within themselves deserves to have a shir on him, right? Famous people, the Yad Ramah, the Sefer HaTrumot, the Sharei Tshuva, Rabbi Yonah HaChasid, right? That's the same, his cousin that we saw before. And his RambaN's famous disciples, right, are the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, the famous Rashba with all of his responsa, Rabbi Aaron HaKohen the Ra'ah, who also is a very well-known halachic figure, his son, right, Nachman, and we see also over here Rabbi Shlomo bar Eli of Shuria, who is identified by some as the Talmid Rabbeinu Yonah, brought in Masechet Brachot. The commentator on the Rif brought in Masechet Brachot. The RambaN's teachers. Okay, here what's interesting to note, what I've emphasized over here, that he actually has teachers from France, or at least those who were taught by teachers from France. Hence, the RambaN was influenced by the French school, the Baalei Tosafot. We see over here the brother of Shimshon from Chance, one of the great Baalei Tosafot. We see over here Rabbi Yitzchak, right, the blind, the son of the Ravad. And his other rabbis, Rabbi Nathan ben Meir, also was a disciple of Yitzchak ben Yehuda. So we have, on the one hand, the RambaN living in Spain and having the Spanish influence, of Jewish Spanish influence. For example, here at the bottom is one of his other rabbanim, was Rabbi Azariah of Girona, who it is claimed that he was the RambaN's Kabbalah teacher. And he had also a very strong influence of the Baalei Tosafot. Okay, here we have a few milestones in the RambaN's life, right, where he was born in born in Girona, Spain. At about 1238, there was a big dispute that broke out in France. I'm not going to go here through all the details. The question was regarding Maimonides' God to the perplexed. Right now, if perhaps you already had a lecture on Moreh Nevuchim, God to the perplexed, where the Rambam writes that his whole book is there's a big secret in his book. And some people claim that the secret is that the Rambam himself didn't believe in what he was writing. because it was a very, very revolutionary what the Rambam wrote in Moreh Nevuchim. Basically, he wrote that anything that pretty much anything that cannot be rationalized in the Torah should be given the status, an allegorical status, right? All kinds of Hashem, all kinds of Hashem's revelations by Hashem should be given allegorical status and not necessarily a literal status. The Ramban was very, very much against the Rambam's position in that sense. On the other hand, he was asked to be involved, and eventually he did support the Rambam's right to have Moreh Nevuchim. Some say that the Ramban himself was a very, very gentle and compromising person, like we'll see. What he suggested to do eventually was to, on the one hand, allow the Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah of the Rambam to be left in Mishnah Torah, whereas the Moreh Nevuchim, he suggested that it not be learned, not necessarily not the violence and the aggression that it was suggested to burn the Moreh Nevuchim. The Ramban here was a bit more compromising, but although in general, like we said, his attitude towards the Rambam's rationalization was very, very foreign to him. Later in life, in 1263, he was forced by King James. We said that King James was a good king, but eventually he was, right, as Christian influence grew in Spain, right, he was forced to debate Pablo Cristiani in 1263.
Gilad.
Yes.
No, I'm not supposed to interrupt you real quick. My grandson just logged in, Jonathan Khan, and I just want to mention, Jonathan, Gilad is just going through a presentation of Haronim, of marching on Rashi, RambaN, Nachmanides. He is now going through the Ramban. This is a summary of the greatness and history of Ramban. Sorry, Gilad, continue.
Okay. Anyway, the king eventually recognized the fact that the Ramban won the debate. He even gave him 300 dinars of gold. But to appease the Christian church, you had to send the Ramban on a 2-year exile, which some say became even longer at the pressure of the church. In 1267, he fled to Jerusalem and subsequently to Akko. He gave his famous sermon in Akko on his first Rosh Hashanah, which is brought down in the book of Drashot on the Ramban, and he passed away in about 1270. There are all kinds of there's a debate where he was buried, whether he was actually buried at Acre, Haifa, Hebron, or Jerusalem. Here, after I had made this presentation, I accidentally stumbled onto his grave, onto his grave in Haifa, which is at the back, right? One of the two plaques at the back is the Ramban. It's very, very unassuming and undeservedly so. But like I said, everything in the Ramban's career, there's very, very few historical facts. Okay, what's the Ramban's contribution to Judaism? Like we said, the Ramban is really a jack of all trades. On the one hand, we see him halachic texts for tractates not previously dealt. He wrote a commentary. In other words, tractates that very often Rishonim wrote commentary on the Rif, but there were some Masechtot that were left down, were not commented on. For example, Bechorot, for example, Nidarim. The Ramban, right, completed that commentary on the Rif. The Ramban was very well known to be a defender of rabbinic works versus subsequent generations, right? He was a defender, for example, we know of his Melchemet Hashem, right? Hashem's war, some call it jihad, Melchemet Hashem, where he defended the Rif versus the much, much younger Rabbi Zerachi Halevi of Provence. He also wrote a book to defend the same Rif against the Ra'avad he wrote a book to defend the RambaN against, to defend the halachot gedolot against the RambaN. Yet he says sometimes that he is not, he's not a doormat that automatically defends the older works. Sometimes he says that sometimes if he takes the liberty not to defend them when he feels that they're wrong, but in general, he certainly was a defender of them. Another contribution, he was an in-depth analysis of various Talmudic tractates. He was actually the first one to put out chidushim on the Torah. Rashi was a commentator. Balei Tosafot really reacted to the contradicting, trying to resolve contradictions within the Talmud, and also trying to resolve or to disagree with Rashi's interpretation. The RambaN here takes it one step further. He introduces his own take on the Gemara, as well as addressing some of the Balei Tosafot. If we have time, I can give you an example at the end of a chidush of the RambaN. Another contribution, of course, is his effect on Kabbalah. We know that his Perush Torah is full of alludes very often to Val Derech HaEmet, according to the Kabbalah, such and such. I heard a lecture recently by an academic who came out with a big book last year on the RambaN, right, an academic work, and he was hard to press to describe in a few words what is the difference between the early Kabbalah of the RambaN and the later Kabbalah of the Arizal. It's something that is way beyond us for understanding. Plus, he has a responsa. We know that his famous responsa, Chidushei HaRamban, now we know are today actually the Rashba's, his disciples' responsa. But I did see a prominent professor of Talmud from the last generation, Professor Simcha Asaf, who said that he did find 80 responses of the RambaN. Of course, he recorded the debate with the Christians. He had to prove that he was the king at the time gave him freedom of speech, and he had to record the debate in order not to be accused of blasphemy, meaning that he had to show the Christians that he did not exceed, he did not downgrade the Christianity more than what the king allowed him to do. He has, of course, a monumental commentary on the Torah. The Chidushim, by the way, he read all the halachic texts in the etc. and the Chidushim that he finished by the age of about 30, right? Later on in life, he started his Perush on the Torah, right, which he completed in Eretz Yisrael. He made about 250 corrections to his Perush when he was in Eretz Yisrael. A famous correction, for example, is that he thought that Kever Rachel was in the north of Yerushalayim, because that was the escape route normally from Yerushalayim northward. But when he came to Eretz Yisrael, and then he saw the Kever Rachel, so he says, yes, here I made a mistake, and indeed Kever Rachel is in Beit Lechem, where I see it today. That's one example of how his commentary on the Torah changed in light of the fact that he was in Eretz Yisrael and could see things firsthand. And he has various sermons, Rosh Hashanah, Life and Death, Kohelet, etc. Okay, here from Wikipedia, we have over here a whole list of all of his works. I think I've exceeded 14 minutes. Lev?
You have another, we'll give you another 45 seconds.
Okay, so this is my last slide, actually. Okay, his attitudes, like we said, he opposed Aristotelian philosophy. He sometimes criticized Maimonides' rationalism, but allowed the God of the Flex to be printed. He believed in miracles, right, as opposed to the RambaN, who rationalized them out. Although he stated somewhere, I don't remember exactly what it was, that the Torah does not rely on miracles. He was one of the earliest middle-aged Kabbalists. Interestingly, he is, the Rashba testifies that he was a physician, that he practiced medicine, But he has in his Parsha of the Torah in Parshat Bechukotai, he gives actually he's very hesitant towards the mandate that Hashem gives that Hashem gives man to intervene with his own will. He says it's just that. In fact, he says that people should not go to the doctor and rely on Hashem to take care of them. But since people already have out of practice gone to the doctor, so we really can't stop them doing that. And he criticized those who believe man should be indifferent to pain and pleasure. That is maybe a crack, all right, at the Litvakers. And he said that the purpose of pain and pleasure is for us to be aware, make us aware of Hashem. Okay, there's much more to be said about the RambaN. This is a real crash course, and I thank you all for attending and listening. If anyone has any questions.
Thank you so much, Gilad. I just say if we can impose on your time yet for another 10 minutes because you're controlling the Zoom, so and we're in recording. Please continue that. Give us another 10 minutes of our comments.
Okay.
Before we continue the comments, of course, I thank you for a very nice. Putting a lot of knowledge in 14 minutes is not easy. And I want to my grandson, Jonathan. Are you there? Are you still there? Jonathan, say hello.
Yeah.
Hi.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure you're there. And also anybody who wants to, Stuart, if you want to join our group, we meet every Tuesday at 8 o'clock Israeli time, 1 o'clock US time. Just tell Gilad if you do, and he will send your telephone to me and I'll add you on a WhatsApp group. So with that, let's open for questions. Guys, great presentation. Any questions, comment? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I have one question. I'm not sure, maybe I just didn't hear it well, but when it comes to the God of the Perplexed, as far as I know, the RambaN said that the guide can be taught, but to people who are like slightly older and who have their minds already set. So like Mavin, just like they say about Kabbalah, you know, you can start learning Kabbalah from when you are 40 plus and Mavin midato.
Okay, that's a good point. That's correct.
I don't remember Nachmanides saying that you cannot, that he said you shouldn't learn the God.
Well, on the one hand, no, he was asked by in other words, the squabble in France at the time was some wanted Moreh Vuchen to be totally eradicated.
Yeah.
And his compromise was to leave the rational parts of Mishnah Torah in Mishnah Torah, and B, not to have it completely eradicated Moreh Vuchen, but like you said, to only those who were more initiated and understood it. Okay, so that's
what exactly does it mean by criticize those who believe man should be indifferent to pain and pleasure? Can you explain that a little more?
Well, there is an attitude that you have to be an Oved Hashem, period, and not take into account, right, the fact that you're in pain, the fact that you're in pleasure. In other words, those are not things that contribute, according to that school. Those are things that do not contribute to Yiras Hashem or to Avas Hashem. You have pain, you have pleasure, and just grind out and keep doing it. The Ramban looked at it in a sense that this is coming to make us that Hashem is actually presenting this pain, presenting this pleasure to us for us to relate to Him, whether it is in the reaction of the pain, the prayer, or saying thank you for the pleasure that He has blessed us with.
Yeah. I'm curious, Mendy, do you consider the Alter Rebbe to be one of those who felt we should be indifferent to pain and pleasure and only think of Hashem and everything, and every bit of food we eat should be dedicated to Hashem and so forth?
There are quite a few Maimorim places that talks about in Chassidus about the reason for pain. And one that strikes me is there's a famous mimer called RambaN by the Rebbe, which talks about, for example, why people have financial problems or struggle financially. And he talks about the RambaN, the great waters of the world, being financial struggles, and the source of them come from actually a very high, great, high lofty place. And the proof of that is that it actually brings someone closer to Hashem, and rather than distance them from Hashem. So anyway, it goes into a lot more detail, but like pain is one of those things in this world that we got to deal with. And there's two ways we can deal with it. We can either run away or we can run to. So
yeah, I've just sometimes felt that the Elder Rebbe and even the Frierdiker Rebbe's attitude that everything should be dedicated to Hashem from morning till night. You should only think of Hashem, only read stuff about Hashem, and absolutely everything else should be taken almost as if it should be avoided unless absolutely necessary. It just seems like a really ascetic view of life, hard for normal human beings to adapt to, but that's just my feeling.
Interesting. I also make a quick comment. I know at one point we planned, because we went through a 14-minute snapshot of Kabbalah, Rashi, RambaN, and then we plan to go to Hasidus, Baal Shem Tov, that's 1698. At that point, which probably also bring the Alter Rebbe. But then David suggested, before we jump that far the timeline of history, we should do Avadia Gaon, I think David said, right? I forget.
Saadia Gaon.
Saadia Gaon.
I'm sorry. Yes, Saadia Gaon. So if we do a Saadia Gaon next time, if you guys, anybody knows a good presenter who can talk about that, let's do that, unless you have some alternative presentation for next Tuesday.
I mean, I am interested in Saadia Gaon, but I still haven't read enough to talk about him. So
Gilad,
I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it.
Gilad, do you know Stuart recommend someone that can do a brief presentation on that? Maybe some of the Sephardi guys can do it.
Yitzhak Sebag is basically comes from a Sephardi background. I can ask him if he knows enough about it.
Let's find out. You guys have a better shot, because I am exactly maybe halfway between Athens, Georgia, and Atlanta, and I'm not sure if there are too many experts here. You'll be amazed. I'm sitting here. I know if you see, I'm sitting there on the side of the road, and it's typical Georgia highway, green, and all the redneck country I'm in. And sitting, it just is so surreal. Sitting in this southern Georgia of the United States, I'm thinking and listening to a presentation of RambaN, and listening to you guys. I mean, it's such a pleasure. Just interesting. There's a bouquet of feeling they're going through. Plus my grandsons. Yoni, maybe you're gonna turn yourself off from a computer for a minute, because I suspect you're on a computer game somewhere secretly, and turn the video on and just show your face for a second and say hi to the group.
I'm here.
Where's the picture?
All right, let me see can you see me?
Yoni, can you do a video on for just a second?
It's on.
His video is on.
All right, Yoni, up a little bit. I only see him now. Okay, great. Now now I know you're there. Okay, thank you, guys. Anything else, gents?
Did Nachmanides pray in the Temple Mount? Do we know that?
In the Temple Mount, I'm not aware of that. As opposed to Maimonides, who supposedly did, I'm not aware if he prayed in the Temple Mount. Certainly, I did forget to mention that he was actually resurrected, in a sense, the Jewish community in Jerusalem. When he came to Jerusalem, he testified that he saw two people, right? Two Jews who lived in Jerusalem at the time, at about 1270 and about 1267, 1268. And he was the one actually who was responsible to reviving the Jewish community in Jerusalem.
How busy of a doctor was he? Because the Maimonides especially the last 10 years of his life, was a very, very busy doctor.
I don't know how much we have information on that.
Mhm.
The information that we know that the Ramban was a doctor comes through one of the tshuvas of the Rashba, where the Rashba is asked if are you allowed to heal non-Jews for free, or do you have to take payment for them? And if I recall, he testified that the Ramban healed them for payment.
Mhm.
So that's how we know that the Ramban was a physician.
Was
Gilad,
he? Do we know? Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Do we know? Do we know? Do we know of any outside influence on Nachmanides' thought, like Islamic philosophy, maybe not Aristotelian, but maybe some other philosophy of Goyim, something?
As far as I know, he did not. I don't know how much Arabic he knew.
Mhm.
I don't know how much access he really had, right, to the philosophies of his time. But like I said, right, he through the Rambam, he was he got his Aristotelian philosophy. And of course, you had the early instruments of Kabbalah, which is it, right? You had the lecture in Kabbalah, right? That's exactly about the time where the Kabbalah started to become more publicized, so to say, right?
Yes. Okay.
By the way, Gilad, when we end the session, I don't know if you recorded things like this before. When you end the section, when you log off, your computer will be saving the file. Please don't lose it. Save the file. So somehow I would like this. I would like to get that file of our recording, Gilad.
Okay, okay, we have less than 2 minutes left.
Okay, just quick question. What was a Rambam comes to Israel and leaves? Ramban comes to Israel and stays.
Correct.
What was the reason? What's the difference in this?
Okay, well, the Ramban, right, fled Spain. The Rambam was much younger when he also fled. I don't know if the Ramban had an alternative. The Rambam knew Arabic, right? And so it wasn't much of a problem for him to immigrate to Fustat, to Cairo. Whereas the Ramban, that was not so much of an option for him. Plus, he was much older than when the Rambam was in Israel, right? He was already in his 70s.
Maybe that explains why today's Russians and Ukrainians come to Israel and stay, but Americans sometimes come back.
Well, I think also if you look at it, Ramban, he had to basically draw a minion around himself in Jerusalem. There were just so few Jews. I think Rambam, he's young guys. He has a lot of things he wants to write about. I mean, he's stuck there without a minion, and he's basically either he's going to make yesh mi'ayin, or he wants to find a community which can support him. I mean, I've heard that it was very, very hard to make a living and get by.
That's
in
correct.
Jerusalem at that time. Whereas Ramban, he's already an older guy. Is you could say he's semi-retired. It's
Right.
most of his writing is done.
Good point. Our meeting
I
is
do know
about
that
to end.
I do know